Hey, how you doing? This is RJ. So, welcome back to my weekday videos where I host stimulating conversations slash interviews with prominent individuals to talk about storytelling and culture. But before we get to the interview, I just want to remind everyone that the campaign for my new graphic novel, The Valiant Heroes, is still up. You can also order my first graphic novel, Thomas Valiant, from that campaign if you wish as well. You're looking at some of the spectacular art from both of those books in the background. And the early bird sign up page for my next graphic novel, CROM the Destroyer, is now up. You can sign up there so that when the campaign opens in about 6 months, you will be informed. And if you do so, you also get a free exclusive pinup poster when you purchase something from the campaign. Once again, you're looking at some of the spectacular art from CROM the Destroyer in the background from my artists, Jim O'Reilly and Mike Gustovich. So if any of that looks or sounds appealing to you at all, you might want to click on that link or both of those links in the description and go on over and see if any of my graphic novels are for you. All right, on with the interview. All right, welcome back to my weekday videos where I do interviews and conversations with prominent individuals about storytelling and culture. And today I have with me Eric July, also known as YoungRippa, who is a YouTube and now publishing sensation with his Isom and Rippaverse comic, which has made over 4 million at this point. So welcome to the fourth age.
Hey, brother, how you doing? I appreciate you for having me. Certainly.
So Eric, what we try to do here with my interviews is to get into the heart of the storytelling elements that the writer or the artist that I'm interviewing has. So I try to get at that in a backdoor way at the beginning, just to give my audience an idea of where you're coming from with your storytelling by asking a very simple, but I find sometimes hard question for people to answer. What is your favorite story?
What is my favorite story? I would say, and I'm gonna take the question like this because I look at it just as in general. I think as a person that has had his share of struggles, I know people like to refer to it as the hero's journey per se, but I love the idea of people persevering. For me, so my favorite story, or rather type of story, is going to be a story where we see an individual go through things, and the audience can actually relate to it that way, going through some things, going through some struggles internally, externally, whatever it may be, and then having to be faced with their own kind of set of actions and doing something about it and persevering. So those stories are always, to me, my type of story per se.
So I have to ask you, since you're producing graphic novels and comics now, were you a comic book kid?
Oh yeah, most definitely. It became even more so as I got into my latter half of my teens and in my 20s. Was incredibly long ago, but had the money, right? It was one of those things that you get a comic here, get a comic there. Certainly when I was young, because I didn't have the resources, but as I got older, got teenager, got my own job and stuff, I was able to certainly collect a lot more, and obviously, putting myself in a position going in my 20s where I can get a bunch of back issues. But I absolutely 100% was a comic book kid.
So I personally would be a Marvel person. When I grew up, I was collecting, I would say 80% Marvel. What were you collecting if you were a comic book kid?
It was everything as far as Marvel and DC. Those are the two companies that I was generally buying stuff from, and I didn't have like much of an allegiance there or anything. It was, I think, I could say as close to equal as you can realistically get. I was a Marvel and DC guy.
So, one question I wanted to ask, and correct me if I'm
Mhm.
wrong, but when I used to watch your videos and you had the background with the art in the background before you replaced everything with the Rippaverse stuff, it seemed to me you did have a couple of Marvel things in the background, like Black Panther, but most of
Mhm.
it was DC imagery.
Mhm.
Am I correct in that? Because it seemed
Um,
like there's a lot more iconic imagery there.
Yeah, I think certain angles of my spot, like of my old videos, I can certainly see that. It kind of depends because, for example, in this room here, there was a point to where, like this, for example, over here actually still has some Marvel and DC stuff up, and it's pretty equal. It all depends on kind of the angle, but I do think that there are certain elements of like DC that has definitely in terms of individual characters seems to have a little more prominence. Outside of like the Spider-Man or something like that with Marvel, DC having like iconic characters and iconic villains that are not, let's say, associated with teams. Yes, there's Justice League, but a lot of them stand on their own. I think makes it a lot easier to have sort of that imagery. It's something that DC I think had at one point done a very very good job of.
So the reason why I asked that question was because I want to get at where you're going visually with your storytelling. Do you want to go with the iconic DC look, or you're going for the down and gritty Marvel look, or even grittier, something like an old Dark Horse look? What is
Mm.
the visual story that you want to tell?
Well, for me is obviously universe building has been it's a thing I would consider my strength, but also an important part of the Rippaverse. And what I wanted to do was, for people that, for me, let me just say this: for comics, a big part of it was the shared universe that I enjoyed so much. It's not that every character had to know each other. It wasn't that every character had to be friends or anything. But the idea, let's say, that someone's events or the conclusion of an event could impact, let's say, like Marvel had all these heroes in New York City. You could find out why this character or this is snowing in July because of what happened in some New Mutants book or something, or X-Men book or something of that nature. I thought that was always cool. So for me, the biggest part of this is building a shared universe that is that prioritizes the canon of it all in the continuity sort of aspect. So we're not rebooting the universe, we're not doing anything like that. The awesome thing about that is that it leaves the door open for whatever story that we feel like telling within that. Isom's a little more down to earth. Considering that, it's what people would consider maybe street level in sort of idea, as opposed to intergalactic world breaking sort of an event. It's not that. And I like that about this. That's the fun thing about this universe. And also, there's going to be a way in that I am able to tell a certain story, maybe even another writer can tell a certain story that will resonate with a certain part of the audience, depending on what that is. I said this plenty of times. Yeah, we got probably 99% like rate in terms of the ISOM or reception, but for people that the 1% maybe that were not on board, I always say like, hey, they'll eventually be something that's along your lines if you have a certain type of book or type of theme that you may have certainly in mind, because we're going to explore those with these different characters that, and you kind of see that with some of the characters that we introduced in ISOM that are going to have their kind of own branch off points.
So, within my own modest venture into crowdfunding comics, I know that I pick my artists very particularly. I want to go with a very clean look. I have Renzo Rodriguez doing the majority of my books. And you, of course, being a writer, you get to pick who's collaborating with you on the art. So, the funny thing is that I talked to Graham Nolan a couple of weeks ago, and he was talking about the fact that you have a lot of these people today who are artists who are not visual storytellers. They're not sequential artists, they're illustrators. And that's why you get this posed look with so
Yeah.
many of these books. And you get Batman standing on a rooftop, but that could be in this book or any book. It doesn't really flow with the story. And also with the covers, you get what he calls evergreen covers because you could just slap it on any book. So what would you do if you want to go back into a good storytelling mode? What are you looking for, I guess, in an artist? And do you want to, are you looking for someone, I guess I would say, that's more of a visual storyteller that will complement you? Or are you directing them so that you're telling them panel by panel, how this moves and putting the story down very strictly when you give them a script?
Yeah, and to Graham's point, that is a talent. This is why a lot of people are maybe better suited to that are artists better suited to do instead of sequential arts, maybe doing covers and stuff like that, because it does take a certain type of person. Now, for me, in my writing style, I of course write panel to panel, and I'm pretty detailed in what have in the panel. So there will be elements, not in every. I give my artists some bit of creative freedom, but I'm detailed in the sense that, hey, I need this guy doing this, right? And even in some cases, I might take a picture of myself saying what kind of or showing what kind of pose or something that I need this person to be doing when it's needed. But having a person that can complement that and has a lot of talent to be able to convey what it is that you're trying to have them do makes it a lot easier to do that as well. And Cliff Richards, of course, being the artist on ISOM One, did a phenomenal job, certainly in that. So, but my writing style isn't like we have other people that are writing comic books, for example, within the Rippaverse, and some of them are a little less detailed than what I am in terms of what I'm having them do in those panels, or what they are, excuse me, having them do in those individual panels. So it makes sense to, and I guess that's the talent part of it as well. When you are in an editorial position, when you are in a talent scout position or anything, that you're teaming that person up with something that can complement it. I think the beautiful thing, and I end on this note. The beautiful thing about this whole space now, whether it be pre-order stuff like what I do, because I did have a baked in audience. I was able to pay for everything up front, or people that do traditional crowdfunding, is that it allowed a lot of people to be able to enter into this hobby without having to go through, let's say, the proper channels. However, there are still people that are over their heads in terms of and maybe overestimating what their capabilities are. And I think that's why you see a lot of stuff that maybe doesn't flow well and all of that, because that's not necessarily that person's talents. Or, for example, like an artist who may be a phenomenal artist, but they're not really a good writer. And that's another talent in itself, because not all writers can draw. Not all drawers can write, so it's all about making sure that you're surrounding yourself with people that can uplift any kind of deficiencies it is that you have, and that's how you make a good product for the audience.
So one thing you touched on just a few minutes ago, I have to ask: is the Rippaverse going to be centered around any specific location, or Marvel's in New York or DC, Metropolis, and Gotham? Do you have a specific location in mind, or is it going to be worldwide?
It will be I mean, not just worldwide in terms of the earth, but we'll be telling stories that are otherworldly per se. It just won't be multiversal or anything. But ISOM obviously is set in Flores Park, Texas, and that is a kind of fictional city that I came up with. And we're able to tell ISOM story. We introduce a couple of other characters there, but we'll be everywhere. It just makes sense, and that's what we want to make sure that we're doing, so we can avoid reboots and we can avoid things of that nature. Because as we continue to tell these stories, I don't need to pack everybody in Flores Park. I don't have to do that. I don't have to pack everybody in the Earth, for that matter. If that story doesn't make sense for them, I can tell it, let's say, on another planet. So we're going to be everywhere. We're just going to make sure, in terms of the universe itself, everything is shared and it's in the same thing. So yes, there will inevitably be characters that will never, not even know that another character exists at all. And maybe their story doesn't even impact the others, but it'll all exist, and you can get invested in it. It'll all exist in the same universe.
So, just to pick your brain about story a little further, for me, I would say my favorite comic would be Walter Simonson's Thor. Do you have a favorite comic or a favorite comic character that you would look as being number one in your mind?
Well, my favorite, I've said this many times before, my favorite sort of thing in the comics was obviously the first big crossover event in Crisis on Infinite Earths, but more so for what it did. And that it was a company realizing that they had done far too much with this whole multiverse stuff. And sure, they've gone back on it since then, but that was their attempt to fix it and merging everything. And I like the story in that it was told was solid, but it also was just from a company perspective, how they were able to just correct them and admit a certain mistake. As far as favorite characters, though, I say this all the time. Like my favorite character growing up was Flash. How I resonated with Flash, and Wally was Flash when I was growing up. But how I resonated with that character was obviously in the speed. Me being a track and field athlete for most of my life up through the collegiate level, and being a fast little kid. In fact, there was a character that was his power. It was to run fast. I thought that was the coolest thing ever. And as an adult, though, it became Batman, namely because of the me being able to kind of understand these them and with the Bat family and some of those characters, understanding where they're coming from and who they are, because I was able to really possess that knowledge. When you're young, you care about that stuff a lot less. It's more, hey, who's doing the cool powers and all of that, and the action scenes and all that. But the stories certainly became, as you start to understand those, became more prominent for me, and this is why Batman certainly became my favorite character as an adult.
So, as I talk to artists and writers at the same time, I see that a lot of artists are trained and they have a lot of training, usually going through some sort of school or university level. But a lot of the writers are self-taught, and it's just school of hard knocks and what I like to write, what I like to do. Now, I know that you went to, I think it was University of Memphis and Texas A&M, and you have
Hmm.
a communications major.
Yeah. Mhm.
Is that the origin of your writing, or do you have any other training besides that, or are you just self-taught?
Most of it's self-taught, but I've been a writer pretty much my entire life. That I can remember. That was something that I did. I was writing my own speeches at a young age. I was doing them at church, and doing stuff like that. So it was more speaking in combination with my writing. And that I turned that into a career even as a teenager when I was doing ghostwriting for other people in various things, not just with speeches, but in art, like with music and stuff. And obviously, I have had a very successful music career as well. But as far as like the sequential stuff, that was something that I picked up on, and I don't. I'm gonna be completely honest with you. I don't know where it came from. It wasn't like my mother was a writer. It wasn't like my father was a writer. I don't remember anybody in my family being anything. It was just one of those things that I kind of just. I do believe it was a God given talent, and it just spanned across. It was writing, and it spanned across different kind of genres where you see the graphic novel and comic book stuff now. But that done music. I've done my own, even with my own speaking engagements and stuff like that, and writing all of that. Like I just had a knack for it, and whatever it was that I wanted to do. And iSum was just a kind of reflection of that. It wasn't the first art project, wasn't the first writing project it was that I had. Certainly the most successful, but it was one of those things that it was either self-taught or it was that I kind of just picked up on it, or I just maybe God just blessed me with that talent because I don't remember any like coordinated specific effort to teach me how to do that outside of the basics when you're in school. But as far as what I'm doing now, what I've been doing, that was just kind of a thing that I just picked up on.
So again, as I was talking to other writers, Mike Barron and Graham Nolan and the like, I think it was Graham who said specifically that you don't need to delve too far into I need to read this book, I need to read that book as an instruction manual wise. He said your greatest resource to try to figure out what to do is go read old comics. He said
Mm.
if you find great comics, go read those. There's your instruction manual right there. Is that the kind of thing that I know that's how I am trying to pick up everything, although I do read other stuff to try to
Mhm.
get my storytelling better. But would you say that you go in that vein as well as read old comics? There's your instruction manual for good new comics.
I will say that that is a tool. 100%, I will agree with Graham on that. That it is a tool that people can use in the event that they want to learn, particularly with the writing. Obviously, with art, it's a little different. But with writing, if you want to understand kind of how these things, exist, certainly going to read what was received well. I think it's very, very important. And even some of the stuff that wasn't received that well. So you kind of compare and contrast and see what works. You know what I mean? And that it certainly can be your instruction manual as well. But to me, I believe that the team, it's a collaborative effort. If you're not doing the writing and the drawing, or the artwork, then it is going to be a collaborative effort. And I think part of the talent in making a good book is either the person who is putting you on that work, or you yourself, if you're doing it individually, like a lot of us are. It is to be honest with yourself and your shortcomings, as I mentioned earlier. And I knew that I can sketch it, but that's about it. So even from the concept art, I have my own concept artist that is internal. My concept artist, isn't a commission. He works for the Rippaverse. Marcus Rios works for this company, and he was doing stuff with me with my own personal stuff before that. And he is such a talented guy where I can explain him and do like some crappy sketch for him, and he could turn that into something that is presentable to the artists that are doing work. And part of that is understanding my deficiencies. And I understand that someone else can make it presentable, more presentable, so we can get as much accurate as accurate as we possibly can, but also that we can kind of see that vision come to life. And that's a necessary thing. I'm very honest with myself, and I understand what I'm not good at. So I make sure that I surround myself with people that are good at what it is that they do, and compliment me more so in terms of the strengths as well. And I think that's just as much a part of creating, let's say, a good book for the audience, is doing exactly that and understanding that, because a comic book's a team. You have your artist, you have and sometimes penciler is different from the inker, and you have your own. You have the writer, you have the letterers, and all of that, and you have to understand where those shortcomings are, and who works well with who, in terms of who really complements this person's efforts and this person's talent. That is just as much a part of it as well.
So I just want to get now at the core of your storytelling. I think you already talked about this a little bit at the first, where you're talking about redemptive stories. But for myself, when I write a book, I concentrate on the heroic. I try to pull out heroism, and I use things like honor and stuff like that. Can you
Mhm.
distill down for your work a central point that you want to expand on with all the stories that you want to tell?
Yeah, so like I said, it's I love the redemption aspect of it, but it's not just that. I understand that humans are very complex people, right? And I think with me, I think experiences are a big part of not even just my own. I've come from my own individual background is I've gone through some stuff. Let's just say that. And I've also been around people that have gone through some stuff, and I picked up on those experiences. Just in, for example, living in different places, like being born and raised in Dallas, but I spent all of my summers in Arkansas, for example. So I spent, 2 months, three, and breaks, in Arkansas, in the country, like two completely different, going from South Dallas to living in the country, like in Arkadelphia, are two completely different things. And, those are two different lived experiences. And, those people are different. And, seeing people like my aunts and uncles and my grandmother as well on that side of the family, on my mother's side of the family, versus my father's side, who are, for the most part, South Dallas born and bred, or even in East Texas, talking about Jacksonville and Tyler and stuff. Those are different types of people that experience different types of things. And for me, it's about telling stories that resonate with those different types of individuals through their experience, not through superficial stuff, not through, like, we have a lot of people try to dig so much into like the racial aspect, or so much into gender aspect, and stuff of that nature. For me, it's more in the experience. And because I've picked up on a lot of that, what I'm trying to do in terms of telling those stories is giving people stories that can resonate with them, regardless of where they're at on whatever obvious spectrum, whether it be political, whether it be, again, racial, or anything. It doesn't matter. It's more about what they have gone through. And that's what I know we're trying to make sure that we do with the Rippaverse. And as well as when you bring in other writers and their experience, that's something that you can certainly have as well. So considering, for example, that myself, I've gone through a lot. It makes the redemption, writing those types of redemption arcs, or writing those types of perseverance arcs, as a very easy for me. But there's also a story to be told for that person that was careful enough to and like more, I guess, a term that I can use, that are more like, yeah, I guess careful is probably the best term that I could use, that were smart enough to not put themselves, let's say, in a situation to where, let's say, they had to redeem themselves because they did something stupid and put themselves in a position or put themselves in a hole that they had to crawl out of. There's stories that can be told there as well, and I think that I have at least a perspective to be able to touch on that, and that's certainly what we're trying to do with the Rippaverse and why there's so many different characters that we introduce, for example, in Item One.
It's very interesting. That sort of reflects my own background because we started off in the city in New England, one of the major cities, and something happened to my family. Then we moved to the country, but I spent my summers in the city going back and forth. So I
Yeah,
know
there
what
you
you're
go.
talking about with a very, very different aspect of different people in your family and how they work within city and country. It's very interesting. So I wanted to ask, with the Rippaverse, I know that you have physical copies, but is
Mhm.
there any movement that you want to do within other kinds of media? And specifically, first, I guess we should talk about whether or not you're going to do any online stuff as, I don't know, supplement to, or versus with new content online only, and then some within books. Is there any movement there, or you just want to do physical copies?
I just really for right now, we're really focusing on the physical copies. There's not a whole lot of let's say direction that we're it's just not with the online stuff or web comics, or that's not really the direction that we're trying to do. We're really focusing, emphasizing on the physical element of the comic books. I think like the essence of it is really what it is for me. However, we are already putting the steps forward to do things outside of comics, let's say that, that we are working on. And I think that the audience is going to be stoked when they see what it is that we kind of have up our sleeves. Because, yeah, as I mentioned in like the opening trailer for the company, we have other aspirations. I would love to enter into other spheres that I can tell my stories outside of simply just the comics. And having a big coming out party like we did with Ice One certainly gave us the startup capital to be able to do some of those things, and we're already entertaining those. So despite us not necessarily doing digital comics or anything, there are some out of comic stuff that we're already kind of putting in the works.
That's It seems to be the way that a lot of people are going. I know talking to Chuck Dixon, him and Graham Nolan have a Spin Rack, which is
Hmm.
it's up now, but I don't think it's fully underway. But they're trying to tie in gaming with their own storytelling and try to make the audience more an interactive part of what they're doing within their books themselves, so that they have some impact more than just being a passive reader. So it's very interesting to hear you going in a separate direction, because a lot of people are thinking to themselves, we have to incorporate a lot of different mediums in order to sell a comic now. So the other question, I guess, on that was, are you intending, at this point anyways, only superhero comics, or are you open to other genres and more fantasy, or noir kind of stories, anything like that, or is it going to be pure superheroes?
It won't be superhero. I think that'll be, let's say, the dominant thing for the universe, that because just in the nature of the target demographic, that's going to be the one that's most well received. I mean, even if you look at in the West, like with even like mangas, a lot of the shonen stuff still is like what dominates. Yes, there's food mangas, yes, there's those sports mangas, but as far as dominating the sales, at least in North America, are it's not those. It's the ones that are very familiar. It's the even the newer ones, the Demon Slayers, the Jujutsu Kaisens, and all that. They kind of have that familiarity, that heroic familiarity there to it. So that will still be the biggest part of it. But absolutely, we will be telling stories that are entertaining more genres. I mean, even if you saw some of the characters that were introduced, for example, Norfolk at the end of the book, that kind of gives you a sneak peek, let's call it that, into some of the things that we are going to do. It's just with those, we have to make sure, and my team has to make sure that we kind of tame our like what we expect, our expectations really for those types of books, because yeah, they're probably not going to do as well as the superhero stuff, but there's certainly a demand for them. So I don't expect to make $3.7 million for every single campaign I do. That's silly, but I 100% want to do other genres, and we will do other genres, and that's the awesome thing about kind of making sure that we're not going too crazy with our crossovers and all that, and that we can tell those types of stories that can still exist within the Rippaverse.
You already touched on this, so I just wanted to go back to it for 1 second. So you're saying that you have certainly enough capital now to go in the direction that you want to, with almost 4 million made for ISOM itself. What is the direction of the company that you want to establish? Is it pure storytelling? And do you think it's going to be something that you want to make as big as something that could rival Marvel or DC, if you ever got to that point? If you continue to have the success that you've already had, is that a place that you want to go, or are you intending to keep it in a small form, like a dark horse, something like that? Where do you want to go with your company?
My aspirations are massive. I want to go as big as the audience will allow me, as big as the customers will allow me. So if they want and will certainly continue to invest in the company as they do through their sales, through their purchases, excuse me, like, then I will, yeah, absolutely rival those companies. However, I don't seek to make the same mistakes that they make. I think that's the positive thing that we can take from some of what it is that they've done, is that we can see what not to do. We're a comic book company first and foremost. Like, that's never going to change at all. That will be our primary emphasis. However, as we try to go into other mediums, be it live action, be it in animation, be it in whatever it is, which I would love to entertain, it needs to have some level of cohesiveness. And that's a primary focus for myself and its team and its company. That's what it is that we're doing. So any event, let's say this character appears in something else, if it's like a live action or something that we end up doing, short film, no long film, whatever it is, I want to make sure that that is reflective of what they've read, if they are readers. I don't want them to feel abandoned. I don't want them to have to see a character that they don't recognize. None of that stuff. I want them to, if I'm telling, let's say if we do an ISOM movie or something like that, that needs to be reflective of the source material. And I don't care about trying to update it for modern audiences, or no, we want to keep it to the source material and give these people something that they can see it just come to life. Let's say that. But yeah, video games, whatever it is, I would love to enter in all that space. And it is expensive to do that stuff. But yeah, to your point, yeah, if I keep pumping out $4 million campaigns, then yeah, that will be there in no time, considering that we have at least 3 books that we're trying to get released this year. So yeah, at that trajectory, we'll be able to do awesome things. But it's just doing it right, doing it right. I have big aspirations, but we don't bite off more than we can chew. We make sure we stay the course of what it is that we're our initial plans, and execute them properly. We don't do debt. I'm not borrowing anything at the moment from banks or anything, and we don't have investors. That'll never be a thing. But we want to make sure that we are efficient with how we spend our money, and very careful. This is why the first thing we did, we reinvested, got more books on the way, and that's what we did with the initial money that we got with that capital. I wasn't going to buy Lamborghinis or anything crazy like that.
So that actually leads right into my next question. And it's the fact that we see these large companies right now, and they're being taken over by ideologues. And
Hmm.
it seems like the small guy, he's coming out and he's producing material that they can't get a hold of. And I think that in that way, especially, you just talked about, you don't want to be borrowing money and things like that. It's a way to make sure that you have control, and that it's not going to slip into someone else's control. But at the same time, I hear all these people say, your detractors say things like, you'll never be as big as Marvel or DC, or all these kinds of things, or it's just a one-off, and or a lot of people are just buying your book because they're trying to, be a part of some kind of alt culture or things like that, not
Hmm.
because they want to read the book. But I did a video about this last week with you in mind, actually, when I did that video, saying to myself, okay, even if that is the case, comics have always been a part of counterculture, and there's always
Yes.
been a certain, I would say, even a large segment of the comic buying audience who were just there because it was counterculture. So if people are buying it because it's counterculture, your book or mine or any other, so what? That's just a part of comic culture. So I want to know, you probably have a better bead on your audience than anyone else. I know, having to go through, because you're doing some of the fulfillment yourself,
Hmm.
you see these people, where they live, their address, how many people are from where and how many orders you're getting from what state and things like that. So do you think that the storytelling aspect of what you're doing is the majority of the sales, or that it is the counterculture element, which again has always been a part of comics?
Yeah, I do think it is the story that's primarily the case, even for people that, because two things can be true. There can be people that are sick and tired of what the mainstream has done, and they feel like this is their opportunity to kind of get into something different. I do think both can be true, but it's still the storytelling aspect of it all. For example, there have been people that have entered this sphere, that have not sold over 60,000 books, that have not been able to get $3.7 million, right? Counter or not. So that in itself speaks to the simple fact that, well, there's clearly something about this that resonates with people enough to where they're coming in the like, magnitude, let's say, in the support that they are. And I think a big part of it is how we package this bad boy. And that was that, look, we came out with the trailer one. We came out with the second. Well, I got like the Rippaverse code of ethics. All of that stuff, I think, plays a part of it because they know who they're investing in, what kind of company they're investing in, and what the company's aspirations are. And I think that's a very important thing as people, the dollar gets tight or people are just more mindful of where they're spending their money. I think that's a big part of it, that they want to know what it is that they're getting into. And they're getting in ground level, really level zero of a company that has these aspirations that they've already made public. We prioritize ourselves and like our transparency and all of that. Like, this is a huge thing for us and what it is that we're doing. And I think that's why we got so many people that were in support of it, because of the universe and stuff like that. There have been plenty of people that had said, look, they never knew who the hell I was prior to the release of the Rippaverse. They saw the trailer, they saw saw me do an interview with someone, and they heard me talking about it, and it was something that they were intrigued by, and they wanted to certainly purchase. And because we had it well packaged, it's a competitive product. That's what it is. I mean, I said, look, I'm not releasing anything. I'm not putting my name to anything that is going to be half-tailed. I don't do that. Everything that I've done, I think, yeah, there's also a baked in audience that I had, though not exclusively, because I built a rapport with them through the other creative things that I had done. And all of those are well packaged. Backwards, my band, you see all our music videos and all that stuff that we did was self-funded, but that we did. That's how it is. And that's how it has to be if you're going to be successful in really any entertainment industry. So we packaged it well. I got artists that, are industry veterans to be a part of this project, and we made this thing be what it is. So I think it has all these other aspects, but multiple things can be true. But at the end of the day, you can be as counterculture as you want. If the product in itself is not something that people want to invest in, they're simply not going to invest in, and you have to give them something that they want. And we were able to give them that with the Rippaverse by making sure everything from the book to the quality of the artwork to everything was just top notch and competitive. You can see that on a newsstand or a comic book shop or whatever, and you can say, "Oh, well, what is that?" And you be intrigued by it. That's what we had to do first and foremost. It was all about the quality and the fact that we presented quality. Well, that's why people came out and supported in the way that they did, and we certainly appreciate them for it.
That's very interesting. I hadn't thought of it that way. And the fact that you came out with basically a mission statement, I think that is something that people are missing, because it's sort of like the Stan soapbox within Marvel. It's, this is
Yeah.
what we're going for, and you know exactly where we're going with it. So if we're building this large universe, you know the direction it's going in. So that's important to people. I hadn't thought of that. It's extremely important point you brought up. So I wanted to ask, and it's a really general question, but I And some might think it as an obvious answered question, but when I ask it, I get so many different answers. What do you think for yourself is the problem with the comic industry today?
Who? Well, there's two big ones. I think right now, the obvious is it has a big content problem. There's a big oversaturation, and some of the content just is not good, mundane. So a big part of that is just in content. Yeah, people talk about the quote unquote woke stuff, the ideologue stuff. That is 100% a part of it, but it's not the only thing. I just overall, it's not good. Well, you have industry vets that have presented stuff that people want are kind of being pushed to the side. They're going for this audience of people that, maybe don't have draw in terms of not able to really tell stories that people want. It's a big part of the comic book industry as well. But the other part, I think, is the economics of it, which kind of ties into what I just mentioned. But even with the whole diamond thing, like I know that kind of got broken up recently, but I didn't know. I've never understood that how it was just one company that every single person went through. It never made any sense to me. But that's what was happening. Companies, the big companies, they don't distribute their own work despite them easily having the money to be able to do it. None of that made sense to me at all. So it has a economic issue right now. Now those numbers, the numbers that used to come from these guys aren't public anymore as of April of 2022, so last year. Diamond hasn't made their numbers public. Penguin Random House doesn't make their numbers public. What's the other one? Lunar doesn't make their numbers public, so nobody actually knows even how many books are being sold. They're trying to guess through like NPD book scans. So that's a big part of it as well. It's the oversaturation. There's too many books being put out like by the big guns, and there's a lot of fluff. It's a lot of nonsense. There's almost no continuity with the big two. Reboot after reboot. Nobody knows, is this character and is this a version of the character that's in the same universe? Who knows? It's convoluted. These are primary issues that this industry faces with how it is that they're doing, and that's the beautiful thing, if I could say, about like the independent scene. Like, and I'm not talking like major indie stuff, because a lot of the major indies like Image and all those, they do the same thing Marvel and DC does for the most part. I'm talking about like in the independent scene, like what we're starting to see. You got the crowdfunding elements, you got people doing stuff like I'm doing, that we're able to identify those problems and simply not do them. There's a completely updated economic model here, like for example with how we did things, that benefits everybody, right? That, artists get paid, they get paid on time, there's no issues there. All of that is able to be done, and it can be a lucrative thing it is that you are doing, where people can make money and live off of it, off of making comic books. And that's been missing for a long time. This is why people are chasing down commissions in the way that they are. So there's an economic problem, there's a content issue. I think it is what it leads with, and it just manifests itself in so many different ways. And I do think we're on the brink of maybe a creative renaissance that will correct a lot of these problems, but don't expect it to come from like the corporate big dogs. It's just not going to happen.
So, what I'm hearing from you is that, well, let's say that your company takes off and you're making comparable money with what you've already made. You want to take that money and make sure you don't flood everybody with content.
Yeah.
Go back to the old Marvel style of 20 comics maybe a month, and then put it into other things like gaming and animation, things like that, in order to make it a more holistic experience within entertainment. Would that be the way that you want to go?
Absolutely. That's the reason why we release bigger books. We don't release just single issues. The issues, I mean, ISOM 1 is ISOM 1, but they're massive. ISOM 2 is 112 pages, right? So I don't have to put out a book like that every month, and we won't have to put out an ISOM book every month, or investing in so many different things. And as far as like books, individual books, we don't have to do that. We can have our writers be able to tell the stories that they're able to tell, and they can take their time. They can flesh out the aspects of the world that need to get fleshed out, certainly because we're at the beginning stages of this. But yeah, I'm not trying to nickel and dime everybody in the sense that, there's so many books that are being put out, and then a lot of them would be meaningless anyway. I'd rather tell stories that matter, and that means, yeah, less books that'll be released throughout the year. Of course, we want to get to a point to where we're more faster than what we are now. Let's say that. And we'll get there. I would love to get to a point to where maybe it's a book a month. It won't be ISOM's a book every month, but it'll be a book a month. I like to get to that point. That's actually my ultimate goal, to get there to where we're at, bigger stories. And there, we have like a story a month, maybe that's coming out. But in order to get there, you have to be efficient with how you're spending your money. And I think the big dogs are in it to like, hey, you get a book, you get a book. Like, just put people on books for the sake of putting people on books. And you'll have a character like Spider-Man being wrote by 5 different writers because there's different stories being told at the same time that they're being released, and none of them are attached. Like, we're not doing that stuff. I've said many times, I want people, when they buy a book from this company, that they get a book that matters. It's not fluff. It's not nonsense. It's not meaningless. It's not being wiped out from a reboot or anything. They own a part of history, and it matters. And in order to do that, you cannot just flood your audience with just a bunch of stuff that you're trying to get them to buy. That's in terms of your stories. Yeah, invest that, like you said, maybe in other stuff. Maybe it's in merchandise. Maybe it's in animation. Maybe it's in other stuff to really kind of give your audience a different experience. But as far as where the storytelling elements are, like in the books, doing too much is, I think, what got these companies in trouble. I don't know how, even despite them going down in sales, unit sales, as of the recent years, the fact that they've gone up in some years in terms of titles, like with the big two, is just insane to me.
So I wanted to move on to the cultural aspect of your storytelling and how much that
Mhm.
is brought into it. Now, I got this information off Wikipedia, so I don't know how accurate it is, but it said that you originally were politically far left and have moved more and more towards a libertarian stance. And I just want to know, is there any element of that in your storytelling? I know there's people like Vox Day or John Delars who are saying to themselves, if we want to produce a comic, it needs to be a conservative message that's being put out there in order to counter the liberal or the progressive message that's coming out through the other mediums. Is there anything like that within the stories that you want to tell for libertarianism, or is it just good storytelling and these things will come out naturally within the production of, just making a good character?
I think that the storytelling aspect is number one, right? That's what I focus on. I'm not of the idea that I need to be beating my audience over the head with my politics or anything. There could be Easter eggs and nuggets that we can drop, and there are universal truths that I think pretty much every individual, regardless of where they think they are on the political spectrum, and yeah, some of those can be libertarian in the sense of, like, not doing, let's say, the non-aggression principle or something like that, which is and it's something that can be entertained. But pretty much everybody, even if they don't call themselves a libertarian, can agree, if they're moral people, that, well, you shouldn't use aggression on peaceful people. So there's those aspects that we can entertain, but I'm not in the business of, at least not with this company, of beat my audience over the head. That's not the medium that I'm trying. I'm not knocking people that want to do it that way, but that's not what it is that I am attempting to do. It's more of just focusing on the universal truths, focusing on the element of storytelling, and that way anybody can pick it up and resonate it. But yeah, people that know me may at some point, there's a little nugget here, this character looks like this, or something like that. But that's what it is. It's just an Easter egg. It's not something that'll be at the forefront of the story. I'm just trying to tell good stories. And I'm not sitting over giving people litmus tests as far as if they're going to be working for us, as far as, like, the political aspect. Yeah, I'm not gonna just have I'm not gonna have a ticking time bomb into my company, right? I'm not. Yeah, we vet them, right? Make no mistake, we vet them. But it's about the stories first and foremost. It's about respecting our customers. That's at the top of our list. And if we can just do that, everything else will happen naturally. So, in a sense, that doesn't mean that I'm obviously a commentator, right? People that know me know that I'm a commentator in the political space. Yeah, sure. Somebody may buy the book and then they want to look into the writer, and then they find out all these things about my libertarian positions. I think that's a more appropriate thing to happen, where they can find out about me talking about it in a different context. But the Rippaverse is about entertainment first and foremost. I'm trying to give people a world that they can get lost in. And I think it would be antithetical to the problem of correcting the problem that has plagued this industry if I just wanted to beat the audience over the head with my personal politics, and putting that at the forefront of the story. That's not really what it is that I'm trying to do.
So I was wondering, would you see yourself in the future as you carry this on? Would you want to be more of a Stan Lee or of a Jack Kirby? Whereas Jack Kirby was sort of the creative engine and wanted to stay there, but you have Stan Lee who started off as a creative person, but then moved into more of an administration and just hired people to do good stories, good art, and was the head of this company. Where would you want to go in the future with this?
I guess a little combination of both because I want to always facilitate this company. Um, you know, always, like, till I'm dead, you know what I mean? Like, I need to make sure that I understand what's going on. I want to make sure everything's connected. I want to make sure the continuity is on in good shape. And sure, as we continue to grow as a company, we're going to bring people into these roles that will allow me to do, let's say, less and focus on like maybe more creative stuff as well. But I will always be a writer. I will continue to write no matter how big this company gets. And yes, I will entrust the development, and I kind of will be the main editor for that pretty much forever, to keep tabs on what this universe is doing and how it's being built, and the stories that are certainly being told. So for me, it's going to be a combination of both. I don't want to get to where I'm like completely hands off like that and just purely in a like more a consultant owner role, administrative role. I'm just kind of just, hey, I'm an ambassador as opposed to actually being one that's producing this content. I don't see that ever being the case. I'm going to always be in the production part of it, in the creative space, in the facilitating space, because this is my passion. This is something that I love doing. But I will expand. Of course, I will bring people on that I will trust, that will be able to do jobs well, so we can get another set of eyes on different things. And I love being able to, by the way, be put in a position where I can employ people and give them good paying jobs to do so. But I'll always be a facilitator and creative in the space.
So, listening to you talk, and I've watched many videos where you talk about where monetize your haters. Take these
Hmm.
people who are just attracting you for no good reason because they want to tear you down. Um, there's a limit. I wouldn't say a limit to that, but more, there's a fine knife's edge wherein you get people who are not proper actors, as in they're not doing this for any reason except to destroy what you have made. But
Yeah.
there's also criticism that is to some extent harsh, but at the same time necessary for, I would say, growth of being a storyteller. Are you able to navigate that knife's edge to see this person? They're being extremely harsh with their criticism of my work, but it's something that I need to listen to rather than just use because I know they're being an actor in a faithful way towards actually interpreting the story rather than just tearing it down. Are you able to navigate that, or
Ye-
do you have editors that would do that other refining of your work for you?
Well, of course, getting reception from the audience is very important. And people that act in good faith, it's pretty obvious that they are acting in good faith and they have something that maybe, they are seeing that they want more of or want less of. And that you can pick that up on, uh, if they're acting in good faith and in bad faith. You actually have to be able to do that. Of course, we still have editors on our team that, you know, facilitate other stuff as well. We had two copy editors, for example, with the with Ice on One. But there's I do believe that there's a difference, actually a big difference between someone that has something to say, be it in criticism or what have you, that's actually in good faith, that's actually genuine. And I think that there are those that just are detractors and they're just in it just to just knock you. And that's what it is. And that's really what monetize your haters is reserved for. It's reserved for people that are detractors just to be that. Yeah, there's also concern trollers. You have to also, understand who they are as well. And that's part of the talent in being a creative, is that you have to be able to decipher that. You have to be able to separate and understand that what's the difference between a good faith actor a bad faith actor and a concern troller. What I mean by concern troller is this person that doesn't have genuine interest in anything it is that you are doing. They don't care at all, but they present it as if they do. There's a lot of people that are out there like that will even give you bad advice on that. So what criticizers certainly have to understand, and I say this as a person that's criticized other people's material, is that not all criticism is valid. And I think a lot of people that criticize think of them, everything they say is valid and people should listen to it. And that's nonsense. That doesn't apply in any industry. It'd be stupid if you do that as well. If you try to apply that anywhere else, where just because someone says something that was against the grain, they must be listened to. Consider it a critique of the criticizer. And as a creative talent, as a businessman, you a businessman or woman, you absolutely have to be able to, if you can't do it, have someone on your staff that can actually, okay, this is something that is valid and something that we need to correct ourselves on, something that we need to take to heart. And this is just complete nonsense. You have to be able to separate that if you are to grow as a businessman.
So we're coming up to the end of our hour. So I wanted to give you at the very least a few minutes to talk about future projects that you have on the go with the Rippaverse.
Oh, well, we have two other books. I haven't announced quite yet. We are getting there, very close to announcing those. But also, iSum 2 will be the next book, and it will be coming in the upcoming months. We are working on some like promotional items pertaining to the Rippaverse that we are going to get ready for. We have a new warehouse that we're getting moved into. Hopefully, that starts this month. Now that it's March, and we will be continuing to just create. But this year, I'm thinking we can get 3 books out. First being iSum 2, and I'm very, very excited for what we're going to be able to do there. So just be on the lookout. This is going to be a huge year for this company. And though I don't expect to make $3.7 million, $4 million on every single thing it is that we do, I do think that we can see a lot of success. And I will say also with the other 2 books, I am not writing those other 2. iSum 2, of course, I wrote, but the other 2 books that will be getting released, you'll get some other perspective. I can't wait to announce those books here soon. So I'm very excited.
So one follow-up question on that. Are you looking to have a continuity of art within the iSum books or with any of your projects, actually?
Within the individual series, yes, I would like to do that. Look, sometimes it doesn't align that way. It's just, this person took a commission during this time we were writing it. It happens that way. But if at all possible, for example, me, Cliff Riches, and Gabe, we did iSum 1, we did iSum 2. Same with Eric Weathers, who now is a member of the Riververse team, not just a contractor. He'll continue to be on the project. So as long as we're doing iSum, the series books, I would love for that team to be the team it is that's working on this stuff. And yeah, there's some level of consistency there, but business is business, and sometimes it doesn't align that way. So you have to navigate it as such. But if we can keep it consistent, absolutely, that's something that we want to push for.
All right, Eric. I think this was a very interesting delve into your Rippaverse and where this company is going and where these stories are going. I want to thank you extremely very much for coming on the Fourth Age and explaining to my audience what the future holds for your company. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate you having me. We'll do it again soon, hopefully.
So, if this interview has given you anything new to think about, hit like, hit the shield in the lower right-hand corner of your screen to subscribe, and leave me a comment. Tell me what you want to add to this conversation. And don't forget, the links are in the description, both for my 2 superhero graphic novels, The Valiant Heroes and Thomas Valiant, and also the link for the early bird sign-up page for CROM the Destroyer. All right, I'll leave it there. I'll see you later. Bye.